On this episode of the WildFed podcast, how does camouflage work? When do you employ it? How do you employ it? Is it really necessary? How much of it is gimmick? A pattern's never going to be as good as the actual materials of the place, but when they're paired together, that can be really, really effective. I was just unloading my shotgun, and as I'm doing that, I start hearing the sound of some hen turkeys. I just stood motionless, and those birds ended up coming over to me and investigating me. 6 inches distance, texture. This is the thing that's the most overlooked. The pattern, no matter how good it is, can't work if the thing reflects light because you immediately notice it. If I really want to break up my shape, the most effective thing is the ghillie suit. Stillness trumps camouflage. You'd be better off without any camouflage at all and still than moving around, because no matter how good your camouflage is, when you're moving, you can see it. Episode 117 of the WildFed podcast. Is camouflage necessary for hunting? With me, Daniel Vitalis, is brought to you by Surthrival. Hey, this is the time of year it's critical that you're taking a quality vitamin D3 supplement. Remember that vitamin D is stored in your liver, and like a bank account, you draw down on it as winter months drag on, putting your immune system at risk. Surthrival's vitamin D3K2 is a perfect solution. It's easy to take, just 2 peppermint-flavored drops a day. And Surthrival's D3K2 is the most natural formula on the market. Its D3 is derived from sheep lanolin, and its K2 comes from natto, that sticky, traditionally prepared Japanese fermentation of soybean. Together, these 2 nutrients do more than fortify immunity. They also ensure calcium's delivered to where it needs to be, in your bones, rather than ending up in your tissues, slowly ossifying you as you age. Like I said, the daily dose of Surthrival's D3K2 is just 2 drops, so a bottle will last you all winter. But it's also inexpensive, and right now until February 3rd, it's buy one, get the second bottle half off. So get one for yourself and get one for your parents or someone you love. Everyone needs to maintain healthy vitamin D3 levels right now more than ever. Get it at surthrival.com. This episode of the WildFed podcast is also brought to you by Wild Food Warehouse. Are you looking for authentic, hand-harvested wild rice? Not that overpriced, paddy-grown stuff you see in the supermarket, but the naturally occurring, truly wild rice that's forager harvested under Minnesota's strict ricing laws. Wild Food Warehouse delivers hand-foraged, wood-fire parched wild rice direct to your door. You can even use the coupon code WildFed to get an additional 10% off your order. Wild rice is more than just a healthy, gluten-free grain. It's a sacred food that was and is a staple for the indigenous peoples of the Great Lakes region, where it's still hand-harvested from canoes today. Some of that rice makes it to market, and now you can get your own. Truly wild rice cooks up soft with a gentle, nutty flavor that's prized by chefs, Epicureans, and of course, wild food enthusiasts too. Go to wildfoodwarehouse.com and use the coupon code WildFed to get truly wild rice delivered direct to your door. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. Well, today I'm doing something a little different. I thought I'd come on and do a personal solo podcast on a topic that's been interesting to me since I was a little kid, and that is camouflage. You know, I was thinking back to my earliest interactions with camouflage as a little kid, and I was about 10 years old. I got my first bandana in that classic woodland camouflage pattern, the green, brown, black. It's got like 2 green colors in it, the one everybody knows. And I remember living we weren't rural, we were in a small town though, and I had a wood line about 100 yards back behind my house, and I went back there and hung that thing up. And I remember going back to the house and looking out and wanting it to just have disappeared. And I could see it, kind of plain as day, sitting there. And ever since then, I have tried to understand sort of how does camouflage work? When do you employ it? How do you employ it? And now that I hunt and spend so much time, sneaking around on the landscape, I'm often asking myself, how necessary is camouflage? I notice a lot of folks come into the world of hunting and feel that there's almost like an obligation to use it. And so I want to talk about that today. And is it really necessary? Does it really work? how much of it is gimmick and hype, and if it does work, to what degree does it make sense to really be employing it? Thinking about all of this, I've got this ethos, I guess you could say, about matching myself to the landscape. It's actually one of the things I love the most about making the WildFed TV show. I really love the opportunity each episode to think about where we're going to be, what the landscape's going to be like, what colors and shapes I'm anticipating there, and then trying to match myself to it. We're getting ready to launch season 2 on Outdoor Channel, and each episode is kind of a little bit of a love letter to the palette of the environment around me. I just really, really enjoy that. And so I think that's in contrast sometimes to other outdoor pursuits. I was thinking about a friend of mine. We were in the Grand Canyon going down to Havasupai, the reservation down there with the very famous and beautiful waterfalls. And I was wearing a lot of tans and dusty browns and colors that blended into the landscape. And his gear was a lot of, I guess, more traditional kind of hiker, backpacker, outdoor equipment, which tends to come in kind of like with 80s skiing, tends to come in really bright colors. And he said to me, hey, I think one of the big differences between us, Daniel, is like all my gear says help rescue me, and all your gear says, hey, don't find me. And I think that's like one of the big differences between hunting and other outdoor pursuits, because most other outdoor pursuits, the color palettes tend to emphasize visibility in case of rescue, so you can be seen by others. And that makes a lot of sense. But when it comes to hunting, obviously we're trying to blend in and conceal ourselves because we're functioning essentially as predators. When I think about that word predator, it makes me think of the film from the 80s with Arnold Schwarzenegger. As growing up, one of my favorite movies. And, there's that idea of this alien predator that comes to Earth and it's hunting people. It's trophy hunting people. And you probably remember the really iconic camouflage that creature had. It was the ability to become almost invisible by bending light, so that when you looked at it, you could see distortion where it was, but not actually really see it. And that's so cool to me, that idea that is today actually becoming somewhat of a reality. Camouflage has made some huge leaps. We're not seeing this in the world of hunting yet, but just to say it, these technologies that essentially today what they're doing is taking a photo of what's behind you and then projecting it up into the front using fiber optics. It's pretty wild technology is coming into existence. And something similar to it, maybe you've seen this before, there's folks on the internet working with plexiglass in a really unique way to make these shields. If you think about maybe the shape of like when you see police going into like a riot situation, those big riot shields that they'd use, think of that shape, that sort of lenticular shape. And what happens with this really clean, pure plexiglass, and I don't understand the physics of this fully, so I'm going to do my best to kind of break it down what I've seen, but the plexiglass is arced around you like a big shield, and light enters into the edges of it that are kind of positioned to your side or behind you because you're sort of inside this shield. And it picks up light and projects it along the plexiglass so that the person who's standing in there almost disappears. Now, not perfectly, but it's really, really impressive, particularly if there's anything horizontal behind them. If there are horizontal shapes, not so effective with vertical. So let's imagine lines like, let's say somebody's standing in front of a couch, and because the couch has a lot of horizontal lines and they get down behind that, those horizontal lines get projected up through the glass and actually make the person sort of appear, or sort of the opposite, make them disappear. It's really, really interesting. So, this stuff is making a lot of there's a lot of technological progress in the art of camouflage. And we're seeing a lot of advancements in hunting camouflage as well. So I wanted to kind of just explore whether or not we need to be taking advantage of those. So is camouflage like really important? I mean, it's got to be, because nature employs it all the time for deception, both for predators and for prey. I was thinking about the octopus probably being the most iconic user of camouflage in the animal world. I mean, it's just incredible. I'm sure you've seen their ability not just to mimic color, but also pattern and texture. Very powerfully. I was just down in the Everglades. I went on another trip recently and was there looking for Burmese pythons that are invasive in the Everglades. And we were hunting them with a dog, and I remember it wasn't very easy to see them. The dog can find them, and I remember coming up, the dog's pointing right at it. And the guy that I'm with, Mike Kimmel, you may have heard him on the show, the Python Cowboy, he says, "Hey, can you see that snake?" And I'm standing right over it, and it took me so long to find it. They employ an incredible camouflage pattern, and, they are predators. And so, that tells me that there are benefits for predators. And again, when we're hunting, we're acting as predators. There are benefits to camouflage. Or think of a tiger. The color of a tiger may seem a little bit strange, like why such a bright orange color, yet those stripes that they have really help to break up their outline. And so there's another example of predators employing camouflage. So clearly, nature thinks it works, and that tells me that there is a place for it, of course, in hunting. But have we overemphasized it? I'm thinking a lot about like activity-specific clothing lately, and how, I have a friend who is a kind of an old school fisherman, and he had this little meme recently, and it was like a picture of somebody like in a pair of overalls with a bucket and a fishing rod, no shirt on, and just like a beat up hat, and it's like how fishermen used to look. And then it's somebody today in like Gore-Tex waders and the flat brim hat and big sunglasses and the neck gaiter pulled up over their face and the UV protective gloves. And it was like, all the gear that people wear today fishing so much more frequently. And I was like new school fisherman. And he's just of that old school variety. And he's kind of always poking fun at how much gear people feel like they need to have in order to go enjoy the outdoors. And there's I think there's like two things going on here. It's not just one or the other. There are benefits to a lot of the technical apparel that we have. There's benefits to a lot of the gear we have. But sometimes what's really going on here, I think, is like a tribal identity thing. So if you think about any sport, like golf would be a really good example. So, imagine all the clothes you could play golf in. But when you see folks playing golf, there's a really specific dress code. It's like pretty form-fit khakis usually, with usually a synthetic style polo style shirt tucked in, small belts, really specific look. Is that necessary for golf? Not really. It's more that it's like, surely it's more efficient than some other clothes would be, right? But a lot of it's like tribal identity. And here's another example, actually, I'm thinking about is fishing camouflage. In the last 3 years, the fishing scene has kind of gotten overrun by camouflage. Now, how does that even make sense, right? I guess that maybe there's something to be said in certain fishing contexts for having colors that maybe match the sky a little bit, so that fish looking up out of the water are maybe somewhat less likely to notice you. I mean, there must be something to it, but the most of this idea of fishing camouflage is really more like tribal identity. It's so that people know what community you roll in or what activity you like to be a part of. So when I think about, and by the way, that's okay. Like, I'm not trying to criticize that. That's okay. It's just when we're talking about whether or not we should employ something like camouflage for our hunts, I think it helps us to ask the question, why am I doing this? And do I need to? Because you might come up with answers like, no, I don't need to. And therefore you might find that your time or money or energy is better spent somewhere else. Or maybe you go, hey, the benefits of this are worth it to me, so I'm going to pursue it. But it's important to know, am I doing this for identity or am I doing this for functionality? And I don't think we often ask ourselves that question. And whatever sports you've ever been a part of or any athletic endeavor or time, anything you do in the outdoors, typically there are activity-specific pieces of equipment, activity-specific clothing that, if we're really honest with ourselves, are more about telegraphing to other people kind of who we are and what we're all about. And in the world of hunting, I think where we see this a lot of times with the photorealistic camouflage patterns, that some examples would be like mossy oak or advantage hardwood or real tree. Those kind of camouflage patterns, and by the way, those can be very effective. So I'm not saying they aren't. I'm saying that when we see those very often, it's folks who want to let us know that they hunt. It's folks telegraphing to other hunters that they're hunters, or it's folks like wanting to, proudly wear sort of the badge that they're hunters. And we'll see that pattern, on things that are never going to go into the woods, like on seat covers for trucks and things like that. And that's because it's not really about hiding the seat covers of your truck. It's about being a proud hunter. And so those kind of patterns have really come to be synonymous with the world of hunting. And I have lots of that stuff, by the way, for various reasons. Sometimes because I really like a pattern or I think it's really cool. Sometimes it's because I can't find the item I want in a solid color that isn't, going to really stand out on the landscape. So sometimes I'll buy a item in one of those kind of patterns because the alternative is blue or red or yellow, and I want to have something that is going to at least be discreet in the environment. It's just this thing that I have where I like to be discreet on the landscape. And I'm somebody who, if I'm on a trail foraging a little bit, I hear people coming. Sometimes I kind of like duck into the woods and just hide. I don't know why. I just always been like that. I like to be discreet and private on the landscape. So I don't like wearing colors that really, really stand out. And that sometimes leads me to camouflage, not because I think the camouflage pattern is going to be so much more effective than a solid, but because that's what's available. And so, I'll use it. But on hunts themselves, more and more, I find myself wearing earth tones that match the environment. Solids. I tend to wear a lot of tans, and I'll get more into that in a little bit, why I choose that. But less and less do I find myself selecting camouflage for my hunts unless I'm hunting something like, let's say, turkeys that have really exceptional eyesight. Or if I'm going to be very still the entire time, like in a tree stand. But we'll get more to some of those specifics here in a minute. I do want to say there is, after I've kind of teased a little bit about, the tribalism of the clothes we wear, there's definitely something to be said for having hunting clothes. I mean, these clothes, are dedicated to blood, to mud, to pine pitch, and, they may be clothes that we want to have scent discipline with, keep scent free. So if you're going to have clothes specifically for hunting, there's certainly no reason why they wouldn't be camouflage if you have a pattern that works well for you in the places where you go. So we'll discuss patterns here in a minute, but I'm definitely for camo. I'm feeling like the overemphasis leads people to feel like they kind of constantly buy new stuff as new camouflages come out, and I think that that's more marketing and industry hype than it is reality. So let's talk a little bit about how camouflage works. The real purpose of camouflage is to break up shape and obfuscate your silhouette. So think about, the classic I brought up before, the, army woodland camouflage, the sort of classic green with brown and black pattern that most people picture when you say camouflage. All those big blobs on there, what they're designed to do is break up the shape of your body so that as you step back and are perceived at a distance, as you're observed, instead of being human-shaped, your shape has been broken apart like disassembled puzzle pieces. And that tricks the eye to some degree. Now, camouflage also employs, color and texture. So it's shape, color, and texture are the key things. And we'll talk about each of those independently. But the first thing I want to say about the shape component, I'm a believer in bigger shapes when it comes to selecting a camouflage pattern. Because one thing you'll notice if you look at patterns that have a very small shape arrangement is as you step back further and further, they often tend to all merge together And you get far enough back and the entire pattern becomes one color blob to your eye. And then it doesn't really work as camouflage anymore at all. It just works based on its color. And that might still be extremely effective. Now it's functioning more like an earth tone, and it might be very effective up close, which if you're a bow hunter or you're turkey hunting, that might be all that you need. But I do like bigger shapes. So some of the, that old woodland style, I think is a fantastic pattern for the fact that the blobs are quite large. When we look at those photorealistic patterns I mentioned before, one of the things that I've noticed is that the effectiveness is not about the pictures on them. So when you look at those up close and maybe they have maple leaves and oak leaves, and I've got a coat that's got little acorns on it, it's like a photograph of the woods. Yet I'll see that pattern works in a lot of places. Like it might work really good in the desert still. And that's because the shapes and the appearance of depth give it what looks like texture, like you're seeing multiple layers, and that tricks the eye that it's seeing through you rather than seeing you, even if it doesn't necessarily match at a photographic level what's all around it. Another way to think about this would be, being here in Maine, our traditional hunting pattern is the checkered flannel shirt. And sometimes I'm just really impressed with how much a basic checker pattern in the right color scheme can break up somebody's silhouette. I've got a friend who wears a shirt that's black and olive colored squares with sort of I guess in between is a merger of the olive and the black. So it's like a third color. And that shirt always disappears wherever we go into the environment. It's like you're looking through it. So that old style of flannel was kind of cutting edge hunting camouflage at one point. Those big shapes really help to break up your silhouette. Another thing to consider here too is the digital versus the more traditional shapes, right? So you have a lot more patterns now that are pixelated. Computers are being used to generate camouflage patterns now. And they have certainly a more futuristic look. I think that's sometimes why they're popular. I've seen some that work really, really well and some that I think are less effective. But I don't think it really matters whether you're using pixels or blobs. Pick something that works for your eye, that you think works. But I don't think it has to be technologically advanced. I'm not sure that we're at a place yet where that's really making a big difference. In fact, interesting to note that the U.S. military has gotten away from its digital pattern for the Army and shifted to something that's very similar. If you are familiar with multicam by Cry Precision, they sort of pioneered that pattern, and the military is now using, or the Army is now using a pattern very similar to that. So they've gotten away from their digital pattern, and whether or not that says anything about the effectiveness of digital or just that they prefer this pattern, I'm not really sure how the acquisition of that goes, but that's something to consider. So when we're talking about shape, camouflage can be a great tool for breaking up our shape. But if I really want to break up my shape, I find the most effective thing is like the ghillie suit or 3D camouflage. If you picture a ghillie suit, it's essentially what you have is strands of burlap that are woven into a material so that they hang down. And when you put on this suit, you get this sort of Swamp Thing look. And it's very difficult to perceive the shape, especially of the head around the shoulders, which is one of the dead giveaways that somebody's looking back at you. So if we're trying to hide ourselves from deer, from bear, from turkey, but we have a very distinctly human silhouette, we're going to stand out quite a bit. So the ghillie suit really works well for that. Now, the classic ghillie suit, like I said, was made from burlap, and they can be a bit heavy and they can be a bit warm. And so more common today would be sort of a zip up kind of over jacket with 3D camouflage and usually some kind of hood that just changes up all your shape. that gives the appearance that you're part of nature. Man, do I find that stuff effective. Now, in the sniper communities where the ghillie suit comes from, they were always made to pair with natural materials. So what they'd be doing is weaving in bits of foliage from around the environment. For most of us hunting, that's just further than we want to go. But I say it because natural materials really do trump synthetic materials. So you're more well hidden with, the leaves and the branches of the shrubs and trees around you woven onto you than you would be from any type of pattern. A pattern's never going to be as good as the actual materials of the place. But when they're paired together, that can be really, really effective. But like I said, for most of us today, since that's less realistic in the hunting scenario, a lot of times the 3D camo tops that we'll be talking about, I wear one from First Light that I can wear over whatever I have on and just zip it up, and I kind of instantly can disappear with this thing. So it's great because maybe I want to go hunting and then be able to come out of the woods and go somewhere not looking necessarily like I've been hunting. So I can just take that off and have regular clothes on underneath it. It's really fantastic. Or I can have just some earth tones under it so that I don't have to come out of the woods wearing full camouflage. And the whole thing is so lightweight that it can fit right in my pocket. But it's got shapes, cut into it that give the appearance of lots of leaves and things. So rather than having to use natural materials, which would be more effective, instead, it's kind of pre-built into it. So consider something like that if you don't want to invest in a lot of hunting clothes. Something like one of those 3D camo oversuits, man, they can be really effective. In fact, little anecdote here, one of the most challenging episodes of the WildFed TV show I've made was turkey hunting. It was one of the first episodes we made, so that's partially why we were just kind of getting a feel for how to work together in the field. Myself and Grant Giuliano, our producer of this podcast, but also editor and cinematographer for the show. And Grant's about 6'2", and he's a big guy, so kind of trying to sneak through the woods to put a sneak on turkeys with a 6'2" guy who's got to look into his camera, so it's hard for him to really look around and be as quiet as he could be if he wasn't holding a camera, if he could just look at the ground, instead of having to look at his screen. Hiding him keeping him from being seen was challenging, so we invested in a good ghillie suit for him, and that allowed him to at least stop looking like a person. And anytime that he could be stationary, it was like he just disappeared, sitting at the base of a tree, sitting at the base of a rock wall, sometimes even just sitting, as long as there was some kind of backdrop behind him, sitting right there in the open, he could be a little difficult to discern. In fact, another story comes up here, thinking about one time where I was hunting turkeys myself, and I had decided to pack it up. All the birds that I had seen had left, and none had come in real close to my decoys. And so I was just going to get myself packed up, but I was wearing that First Light 3D top that I was talking about and a hood. And I got up onto my knees, and I was just unloading my shotgun. In fact, I had the breech halfway open as I was about to eject a shell because I was going to walk out to the road and go to my car. And as I'm doing that, from behind me, I start hearing the sound of some hen turkeys, and quite a few of them. So I froze because I didn't want to spook them and wanted to see, I was hunting toms, but, was there one with them? Was one going to come in? I didn't want them clucking off. So I just stood motionless, or actually kneeled motionless. And those birds ended up coming over to me and investigating me. And I'm talking about like at, 6 inches distance, walking all around me, now I've got a backpack on, a shotgun in my hand. I'm on my knees. I'm wearing tan pants, but I'm wearing this top that does break up my shape quite a bit. And they investigated me at length. They felt very strange about what I was, but they never alerted. and eventually moved into the field, and I settled back in and continued to hunt that day. They were not able to ascertain what I was. I've had the same thing happen with deer when I'm turkey hunting, and deer step out 20 yards away and are staring at me and cannot tell what I am, because the way that 3D camo just breaks up your shape a little bit. So, I think that stuff is really, really effective. I'll often wear that in a tree stand as well, depending on the time of year. Sometimes it's so cold, I'm wearing so much clothes, I can't really get it on effectively over the top of what I'm wearing. But if I'm early season tree stand hunting, if I'm hunting bear, which a little bit warmer weather, and I'll be in a tree, I really like to use it. Now, I guess the most important thing to say here, though, is that, and this is true whether we're talking about 3D camo and ghillie suits or we're talking about any pattern, no matter how effective, movement, or I should say stillness, trumps camouflage. I think, you'd be better off without any camouflage at all and still than moving around, because no matter how good your camouflage is, when you're moving, you can see it. And animals that make their living by not getting eaten are very, very keen at noticing movement. And so no matter how good that camouflage pattern is, if you're fidgety, if you're checking your phone, if your head's swiveling around constantly, boy, it's really easy to get noticed. So camouflage works best when you're still. But if you're still enough, you don't really need camouflage. So after shape and breaking up shape, the next way camouflage works is in color. We'll get back to the show in a moment, but first, this episode of the WildFed podcast is brought to you by Red Kill Mountain Homestead Farms. Red Kill Mountain is home to New York State's largest wild apple savanna. Overlooking the east branch of the Delaware River is a beautiful hillside covered in wild apples grown from seed. These apples aren't the name varieties of grafted clones you get in the store. These are wild, seed-grown apples. The apple season's just about over, but Red Kill Mountain Homestead Farms is shipping their wonderful dried apples, apple molasses, apple spread, and bourbon barrel maple syrup. I get really excited about their apple molasses, also known as cider syrup. Apple molasses was a traditional sweetener used in homestead kitchens before the availability of inexpensive sugar products, and today it's listed by the Slow Food Arc of Taste as an endangered food. Red Kill Mountain is one of only 3 producers left in the country. Red Kill's apple molasses is made by pressing fresh sweet cider from their hand-selected, genetically diverse apples and then reducing it down into a syrup with the consistency of molasses. It's sweet, but with an incredible complex bouquet and flavor profile you won't find in other sweeteners. It's great for holiday dishes, baked goods, roasted vegetables, and is perfect for apple pies and crisps. You can even add a tablespoon to hot water for a quick hot cider drink. Head over to redkillmountain.com and use the coupon code WildFed for 10% off your order. Red Kill Mountain Homestead Farms. Truly wild, truly diverse apples. Now, back to the show. I think in order to know what color is appropriate, we got to kind of know where we're going to be and when we're going to be. So what time of year. It's pretty interesting to notice the difference here where I live between spring and fall. In the springtime, there are these electric lime greens everywhere of this new meristematic, growth in the plants. So all this fresh tissue comes up and it's bright, bright, bright green. And as the season goes on, those tissues accumulate more and more chlorophyll. They get deeper and duller green. Eventually, we give way to fall, and now the landscape is covered in psychedelic kaleidoscope colors of fiery reds and burnt oranges and these electric yellows. And then eventually all those leaves doff off and we're left with a really brown landscape of muted, fall colors. And so the pattern that you wear or the colors that you choose to wear on the landscape should be dictated by the colors of the landscape at that time and in that particular place as well. So one of the things that I notice, you can see this if you follow, some hunting accounts on Instagram or somewhere like that on a social media platform. I really love looking at people's, grip and grin pictures to see how the colors they're wearing match the environment around them. And very often you'll see that the colors that they're wearing or the color of the camouflage pattern they might be wearing stands out more than it blends in. It's really, really common. One of the reasons I think that's happening is because right now in the hunting world, the Western alpine hunt has become the sort of holy grail. So, and I think popularized by shows like Meat Eater, where they spend a lot of time, in Alaska, or they spend a lot of time on big open tracts of public land in the mountains. So they're up in the Rocky Mountains a lot, places like that. And up there in the alpine, you got a lot more exposed granite, a lot more exposed stone. And you'll see a lot of the color patterns that are really, the camouflage patterns that are really optimized for that environment will have a lot of grays and even these kind of almost bluish hints to them. And those patterns become popular because those hunts are popular. And then folks adapt them to where they hunt, because most folks are hunting in forested areas, or a lot of the folks that I know are hunting in forested areas, and they'll wear those patterns that have these grays and blues, and they just stand out on the landscape. Also, pretty important to keep in mind that, deer see in the blue end of the color spectrum. So like the worst thing you could probably wear deer hunting if you wanted to not be seen would be like the color blue jeans, let's say. That would be very detectable. That would be like for your eye when somebody's wearing hunter orange, blaze orange, it's like it stands out to your eye. Well, if you're a deer, blue's going to really stand out. So for me, the idea of wearing a pattern that leans on the blue end of the spectrum, even if, it's not actually blue, but it's kind of the grays have a little bit of blue to them, or the greens have a little bit of a blue to them, then I think that makes you a little bit more detectable. And it's the contrast. So we want colors that are not contrasting with the landscape. We want colors that are merging, that feel like the background elements of the environment. So use social media as a tool to develop your art of seeing with regard to color, shape, pattern, and texture, because all of the hunting pictures that get posted can be like an educational tool to help you figure out how to blend into your environment even better. One of the other things I noticed with regard to color is that a lot of the photorealistic patterns we were talking about before, those classic hunter patterns, there's a lot of new ones now that aren't, sticks and leaves and twigs and things like that. But those patterns have dominated for a long time. And they're so popular and they're so widespread that there's a lot of really cheap garments and a lot of really cheap equipment that has those patterns on them. And people will buy those thinking, well, it's camouflage, it's going to blend in. And what happens is those materials, they very often oxidize in the sun. They fade out. And what you'll have underneath that must be some artifact of the printing is that they'll have these like pink or orange colors that they'll fade to. And I've got a friend who's got a beautiful property with dozens of tree stands, very nice tree stands, Millennium. That'd be, by the way, the brand of tree stand if you're in the market for tree stands, especially stationary tree stands. Wow, they're incredible compared to what's on the market. But he's got beautiful tree stands all over the property. But the tree stands have kind of like these, some of them anyway, have a little canopy above in case it's raining. So you got like a nice little nook you can get in. And of course, those come in one variant, some variant of one of those photorealistic camouflage patterns. Well, over the years, from exposure to the elements, those canopies have faded to these just pink colors, so that when I'm walking on his property, I can see his tree stands from hundreds of yards away, because now not only do they not blend, they contrast so dramatically that they're really obvious. And I think, wow, I guess the animals there are probably quite used to seeing them all the time. And so, you're not trying to hide the tree stand at that point. You're trying to, you're hoping that they don't notice someone's in the tree stand. But for me, again, with this kind of ethic of trying to keep things muted on the landscape and being discreet on the landscape, that always bothers me. My buddy's got a fishing case that was one of those camouflage patterns, and it's pink now. It's just, that's the color it's faded to. So Pay attention to that. I notice a lot of times people will have camouflage clothes that they wear hunting that are so old at this point that they faded so dramatically that they just aren't dark enough to blend in with the landscape. Very often I have found that too dark is a problem with many camouflage patterns, but too light can happen when things get old and they get washed out. And if you're thinking like, well, this thing it's expensive, or it's a really good brand, or why would they sell it if it didn't work? I wanted to bring up this story that I just find, tragically amusing. The Army had a pattern, you probably remember it, called the Universal Camouflage Pattern, or UCP, that I think they developed it back in 2003, 2004, doing testing, looking for a new camouflage pattern that would replace that woodland pattern that had been the dominant pattern for so long. And it would replace over in Afghanistan, in Iraq, it would come to replace the 3-color desert pattern that had been worn over there, that I think is a really good, effective pattern based on that 3-color desert's like 3 colors of tan brown. And it's a good pattern and it works really well. But they replaced it with the UCP pattern, which is that first digital camo pattern that many of us saw. Kind of these sage bluish green colors with this sort of khaki color to it. And it was meant to blend into every environment, but in reality, it kind of didn't blend into any environment. In fact, I'd messed with it a little bit, and the only places I could ever make it work was up against lichen-colored rocks, where you'd have these sage-colored, that kind of sagey green, almost blue-green colored lichens against granite. But that's a pretty limited context. Everywhere else, it pops against the landscape. I had a friend tell me a story. He was in Afghanistan, and he had been wearing 3-color desert, and he said, new guys started showing up, and he'd see them at a couple hundred yards and be like, "What? Why are they wearing blue?" And they had started calling them Smurfs, because it was like, it seemed so strange to them. Why would you wear this color that makes you more obvious, not less? Well, obviously a tremendous mistake was made, to the tune of about $5 billion, actually. This is kind of considered one of the great colossal mistakes, because the Army has since, I think they fully phased this stuff out in 2019. I know there's some old stuff floating around, equipment floating around that still has the UCP pattern, but now they're on to this new pattern called Operational Camouflage Pattern, or OCP. So, I see it a lot in the airports. I'll see it on people who are deploying, and it is so much more effective. They finally got a really good pattern, but it cost a lot of money. And in fact, Congress got pretty upset about this and put some rules in place that would stop them from just being able to change patterns because of how big a mistake was actually made. Another interesting anecdote on the flip side of that was with the Navy. Their pattern, I think, NWU, maybe it's called. Anyway, they came up with it's a digital camouflage pattern in blue and gray. And that pattern was a little bit strange, because kind of eventually realized, hey, wait a second, this stuff makes you blend in with the water, which really only works if you've got a man overboard. So they've now changed as well back. They're still using a digital pattern, but changed back to colors that, more in the sort of classic woodland pattern. One of the other things I've noticed is that the color of these patterns that they're using now are less dark green than the old woodland pattern. So if you think of that old woodland pattern, the green was quite deep, like a forest green. And today they're using much lighter greens. Now, I'm sure partially that's because, our soldiers operate in, desert environments too. And so those dark greens are probably too dark. But I have found that very often patterns are too dark, and lighter patterns usually work a little bit better, to my eye anyway. And so it's been cool to see this shift away from that. Another thing that comes to mind is how there's also a bit of a shift away from so much green. If you look at the Marine Corps pattern, it's called MARPAT. And that's got their MARPAT woodland is based on this color coyote brown, which I'll get to in a bit because it's one of my favorite colors for hunting. But coyote brown is this, it's a tan brown with almost a bit of a orangey kind of hue to it or temperature to it. And I'm seeing more and more tan dominant or brown dominant camouflages instead of green. There's a company called ASAT, or at least a camouflage pattern called ASAT you may be familiar with. It was popular for a little while. It's one of the patterns actually that was designed specifically for how animals see rather than for how people see. So, when you think about a lot of the camo patterns that were popular up until recently, they really were designed for the human eye. And more the companies developing the more cutting edge camouflages are thinking about, well, how do ungulates see? Do we want to make patterns that just work for people's eyes, or do we want it to work effectively for the quarry that the person's pursuing? Well, anyway, ASAT has this saying, animals aren't green. And of course, that's not entirely true because of amphibians and reptiles. But it is interesting how well a deer blends into the landscape, being a sort of a orangey brown in the summer and a real dusty tan in the fall. Brown, not green. When we do camouflage, we tend to think green. You think about how well even a bear can hide, being black, or being dark brown or chestnut colored. If they're in the right environment, they can just wash right out. So anyway, ASAT doesn't have any green in it at all. It's tans and browns, and very, very effective. So I'm noticing a bit of a movement towards those kind of colors. I brought up before the classic Maine checkered flannel, and there's two styles. One of them is a green that I'd call the classic Maine forest green, and boy, I don't like that color. I just find that it is not an earth tone, but it's common to see a lot of particularly more old timey hunting clothes. So if you were to go to a place like LL Bean or Filson, you'll see sometimes this green color that you're like, that's not really found in nature, yet it's called a forest green. So I'll see that color green, it's a bit garish to me, with a black checker, or you'll see red in a black checker. And if you think about, again, talking about ungulates who don't see in color, particularly, they can't see blaze orange as blaze orange. They see it as a tan. They don't see red like that. They see it as a tan. So the red and black checker, that really kind of represents old-timey, New England, that was a hunting pattern, and it's effective for deer. If, you're wearing checkers like that and they alternate dark and light, especially when they've got that third color in between of the two blended, that kind of gives it like a subtle gradient. Wow, that stuff can really, really blend you in. But again, look out for things that look blue at all to your eye, because that's what deer see. The other thing I wanted to say about color is sometimes spots of really bright color can work so surprisingly well. So think about a fawn, a whitetail fawn, whose job in the beginning is to hide in the grass while mom goes out and feeds. And they've got these white spots all over them. You'd think that would make them very noticeable, but really it's a camouflage, and it gives the impression to the eye of depth. And what it looks like is that sunlight is dappling the ground, that it's sunlight cast down through foliage, through canopy, and it's leaving little spots. And you'll see if you look at, I brought up the pattern multicam earlier, it's got that same thing. It's got these spots that are maybe the size of a fingerprint, scattered throughout, that are fairly light. But I have found that pattern to be incredibly effective, and it's because it gives that sense of depth. So a lot of times if I'm camouflaging something, I got to say I'm a bit of a nerd for, a can of Krylon. I love to spray paint things, camouflage. I love to change the colors of things sometimes. So I'll often add light spots like that and just try to give that impression that light's penetrating through the object, which can help to break up its lines even better. So, just to say, like, I find multicam very effective. Another pattern I found very effective, I don't wear it, and my friend Mark does, and he always thinks I'm making fun of him when I say it. He thinks I'm making fun of the pattern, but I always tell him how well it works. It's called Gore Optifade. And to me, I don't like the way it looks. I think it's ugly, but it is extremely effective. It's a sort of... it's a digital pattern that has the impression that it's been stretched and distorted slightly. And, but the colors are really right on. I like a lot of the First Light, patterns as well. I find them a bit light colored, and I think that's because, I think they're optimizing for times when people actually hunt, like fall. Sometimes I do wish there was a little bit more green in the pattern, like the fusion pattern. So it would work a little bit better where I live. I think it's really optimized, for, out west, but man, those are great patterns as well. And one of the things I really appreciate about their patterns is they've gotten away from all of the sticks and leaves and twigs and berries that were on a lot of these patterns, and kind of gotten toward, these more indescript shapes. I really like that too. One thing I want to bring up is the idea of snow camo. This is this thing that, man, if you do a little searching around, you'll find like that there is quite a cult around the idea of snow camo. I had a teacher who was a sniper, for many years, and he always told me, listen, like, just a white sheet is your best snow camo, because all the little folds and all those things will give the impression of color splotches. But you don't want to put color splotches on something that's meant to be hidden in the snow, because when you're moving across a snow field, all those things really stand out. They contrast against snow. So pure whites work a lot better. But that said, I found, I'm going to just tell you my favorite colors, and that is the tan and browns, called Coyote, and Flat Dark Earth. So Coyote is one of the colorways really popular in military equipment. So if you're buying military gear, tactical gear, typically comes in a handful of colors. So here are the colorways. It'll be Coyote brown, black, olive green, wolf gray, and sometimes a ranger green. So usually if you're looking at a pouch or something like that, it's going to come in those 4 to 5 colors. Coyote tan, I think, is essentially the background color of the world, in my experience. That, and somewhere ranging between that and this color Flat Dark Earth. If you're familiar with the company Magpul, who builds, they're really a polymer company, I guess. They build firearms parts. What they're probably best known for today is the magazines that they produce, and grips, fore-end stocks, things like that. They produce they produce beautiful, kind of modernized, upgraded furniture for iconic firearms. And they pioneered a color called Flat Dark Earth. A lot of people try to copy it. No one gets the color quite right, but I really, really like this color. It's like the color of a dry riverbed, like the clay in a dry riverbed. So the Coyote tan, ranging from there to Flat Dark Earth, I find that those are the colors of the background of nature. So a lot of times when I'm sitting out, if I'm glassing, or I'm sitting out in my tree stand just looking out, or if I'm out foraging and just looking out in the environment, I like to ask myself, like, what is the background color beneath all the colors that I see? I brought up that teacher that I had, that was a sniper. In addition to talking about snow camouflage, another thing he said is, like, people really overlook how good olive green is. So olive drab, the color that, like, let's say the soldier uniforms were in the Vietnam era, that color is the green equivalent of Coyote brown or Flat Dark Earth. Again, it's like one of those background colors in nature. It works very effectively, but I think the Coyote brown and the Flat Dark Earth colors work even better. And so that tends to be what I emphasize. I might have something on that's camouflage as well, but almost every pair of pants that I wear out in the environment is that color, or my boots are that color, my backpack's that color. I like I like to wear a mix of similar but slightly different earth tones, because I think that taken together, they kind of create their own pattern. And I like them because they're more versatile outside of the hunting world. I've been in the airport a lot lately, flying around to make the final episodes of season 2 of WildFed, and it's always funny to me to see people wearing hunter camouflage in the airport. It's funny because that's an environment where it really stands out. And it's really noticeable. It's like a statement. But I can wear the same clothes that I'm going to wear hunting. I can wear the same pants, because they're tan and they don't really give off all of that same messaging. And I like that. Okay, so we talked about shape and we talked about color. I want to talk about texture. This is, I think, the thing that's the most overlooked. So I've noticed, especially, by the way, for bird hunting, think about any birds that you've ever handled and what the feathers are like, particularly game birds. Let's say ducks are this way, turkeys are this way. Let's say you take a turkey and you just move it subtly in the light. What do you notice? It's like incredible iridescence. Something that looks black suddenly looks fluorescent green, suddenly looks purple. There's all this iridescence. That tells me that these birds see iridescence. They see shine. And very often what I've noticed is that modern hunting clothing is being cheaply made out of materials that are synthetic and have a high degree of luster or shine. I'm very, very sensitive to this. I first started to clue into it because I had tarps that were camouflage, and I was trying to hide some things in the woods using camouflage tarps. And the pattern, no matter how good it is, can't work if the thing reflects light because you immediately notice it. So when you look out at the landscape, what's the first thing that pops to you? It's like something that's shining. So, if you've seen those kind of camouflage tarps I'm talking about, try it sometime. Unless you get rid of the shine, the pattern just doesn't matter. It helps maybe a little, but it's not going to conceal something. So I've definitely seen a lot of hunt clothing that is that kind of synthetic material that like basketball shorts would be made out of. So light hits that just right, and it reflects. And so that is very noticeable to certain animals, particularly I think birds, because they're looking for that kind of iridescence. Their eyes cue in on that. So anyway, that's something to take into account. Once I bought a ghillie suit, one of those 3D camouflage suits I was talking about. This was actually when I was turkey hunting with Grant for our episode. I liked the one he had so much. I tried to buy one that was similar, but the one that I got in the mail was just so shiny. I've never used it. It's just sitting on a shelf because I'm afraid that it's going to be too obvious. Even though the colors work, and even though it's got so much of that 3D quality that it really, really breaks up my outline, if it shines, then it's going to be easy to pick up on. Okay, so in conclusion, do I think camouflage is necessary? I don't think it's necessary. I think it's important. It's statistically important. Like I said before, animals employ it all the time. So, evolution is a very expensive process, and things that aren't effective tend not to get retained. And so the fact that camouflage has, evolved through so many different pathways and for so many different species tells me that it works and it's important. I think though, like I said, if you're moving, it doesn't work. If the texture or the shine is wrong, it's not going to work very well. If the color is wrong, it's not going to work really well. So it's important that you match it well to your environment. Okay, that said, I also just don't think it's necessary. And it's much less important than a whole lot of other fundamentals. Again, movement discipline, scent control, things like that, I think trump camouflage every time. So let's say camouflage maybe adds 15% advantage or a 20 to 25% advantage or something like that over not having it. Maybe it's somewhere in that area. But if you don't have your other fundamentals right, it's not going to be as useful. So think about if you just started, like the journey of cycling. Let's say you got into cycling, and you were like, well, I'll go out and I'll get what the elite riders of the Tour de France are using. It's like, hey, you're not ready for that level of equipment, even when you're a beginner. you got to learn the fundamentals. Your equipment matters much less early on because you need to develop fundamentals that are sound. And then later on, the small advantages you get from the better gear really make a big impact. Well, similarly, you can get all the latest, greatest camouflage, but if you don't have good skills in the woods, you're going to get picked up. If you're not good at scent control, you're going to get, you're going to alert animals to your presence. If you're not good at noise control, if you're not able to walk softly, if you're not able to stop fidgeting when you're sitting, the camouflage is just not going to be very effective. So for me, I'm looking for matte materials. Wool is just an incredible one. I was just in Arizona in the desert, and the expanses are very huge there, that we were able to see hundreds and hundreds of yards at any given time. So it was really cool to see my camera crew and our guides and be able to observe everybody at different distances to see whose clothes worked in what different ways and in what different environments. And my friend John was wearing a wool sweater, just kind of a classic wool sweater, but in a kind of a tan, almost verging on olive color. And the fuzziness of it absorbs light. It's not got a flat, smooth surface, so it can't reflect, and so it eats light. So that matte olive, even though the landscape around us, we were quite close to Sedona and Jerome, so it was a lot of red rock, and he's wearing this olive color, but he was blending in so well because my eye ignored him, if that makes sense. My brain was like not picking him up because light was being eaten by him. So it just blended in a way that even things that were the right color but the wrong texture weren't. So looking for things that are matte. And I personally like solid earth tones. Like I said, if you're wearing a mix of them, it creates its own kind of camouflage pattern, right? Because it's different shapes. So let's say you're wearing a shirt in one earth tone, a real earth tone too, by the way. A lot of things get called earth tones that you just can't find on earth. But let's say you're wearing a shirt in one color and a bino harness is a slightly different color and your pants are a slightly different color. Now it's kind of like camouflage. Each one's like a different shape and they kind of help to break up your outline a little bit. And then I wanted to say that I tend to buy, I have found especially going to like box stores, hunting box stores, that the equipment's pretty low end. So I draw really heavily on the tactical gear, high-end tactical gear that's been made. I find it's more rugged, it's better materials, and I can get these colors like the coyote brown that I was talking about that I like so much, or the olive green that I like so much. Because those are always available. And more you're going to see companies are switching over to those materials and components. I've been wearing lately a binocular harness from Marsupial Gear, and they're using all the same, they're sewing in the same way. The equipment looks like tactical gear, except adapted for hunting. So it's those same kind of buckles, it's those same zippers, it's all the same stuff that's being used in military equipment, but for the hunting world. And I like that because those products tend to be more robust, but also they come in those colorways that I like. I did also want to say that there's a book I really love on this topic that I've had in my library for a long time. It's the Army's Field Manual 5-20 called Camouflage. My copy's from 1968, so I don't know. There's probably more modern versions. I must have got it, I don't know, Army Navy store or something years ago. But it's because it's older, I find it supremely readable, and it really breaks down the art of camouflage and how to deceive the eye. And not just in woodland environments too. Like, I don't know if you're familiar, you may have seen before how ships were once camouflaged with a pattern called dazzle. Fascinating to see because very bizarre, almost modern art style paint jobs on these ships that were designed to kind of break up so it would be hard to see on the horizon how big the ship was. So it kind of goes into all that stuff, not just, how to, paint something camouflage, but how to hide things. And it's really, really useful. I think a good one to have in your library. So we'll link to that in the show notes. So those are just my thoughts on this topic. I'd be curious to hear from you. Go over to our Instagram. It's at wild.fed and post your comments on the post for this podcast. I'd love to know what you think about camouflage. Is it necessary? Do you use it? Do you like it? Do you think it's a gimmick? What are your favorite patterns? I'm a real nerd about this stuff, so I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks so much for tuning in today, and I'll be back next week with a brand new interview. Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. Help us grow this show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. If you still haven't seen season 1 of the WildFed TV show, you can go to myoutdoortv.com, grab yourself a free trial subscription, and then check out all 10 episodes. Season 2 of WildFed premieres on Outdoor Channel in early 2022. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out our store for WildFed hats, stickers, and more. WildFed. Food is all around you.